Hello guys and welcome back to another video. So today we're going through a full language paper 2 summary so you know everything ahead of the exam. So overall, what is the paper? We've got question 2, we've gone in a different order. Question 1 is shading in the true statements. Question 2 is a summarize of the differences. Remember on this paper you get 2 sources, you don't just get 1. Question 3 is analysing language. This is the exact same question as language paper 1, question 2, but this one's just worth 12 marks. Question 4 is comparing attitudes and perspectives. That is different from question 2. Question 2 will be specifically focused on a specific difference, whereas question 4 is a bit more about their attitudes and perspectives, i.e. their opinions. And then question 5 is persuasive writing, so letter, speech, article, essay. So question 2 is the summary question. So this is 8 marks. So what you want to do is you want to use both sources to write a summary of the differences between, and then it'll be whatever. It might be between their focuses on jobs, the workplace, it might be their attitudes towards animals, anything. Doesn't really matter what it is, but it will give you a specific focus. And this is actually different from question 4, whereas lots of students are like, oh my God, like question 4 and question 2 are the same. No, they're not. This will give you a specific focus. Question 4 is a bit more general. And also don't be worried about repeating your ideas in question 2 and question 4 because examiners actually mark things based on question, not based on your whole paper. So it's very unlikely a whole examiner is going to get your whole paper. So it's 10 to 12 minutes, and the top skills to use is you want to summarize key differences. That might be experiences, feelings, events. You're summarizing for this. You're not giving me full detailed analysis, which is obviously quite contradictory to what we're used to. I don't need a full analytical breakdown. You're just summarizing it, giving me what it suggests. Using comparative connectives like whereas, unlike, in contrast, comparing them because it's a summary of the differences. So we must show where they're different. And then infer attitudes or implications from the details. So what is implied? So don't just tell me the obvious things, tell me what is implied, but you don't need loads of detailed analysis. We don't need any language techniques or structure techniques. You're just telling me, oh, this could suggest. So let's go into the main mistake of this is just describing both sources without comparing or linking the question focus. So I see it all the time with students. They will literally just compare the sources and they'll just be like, okay, this has happened and this has happened, but it doesn't link back to the focus of the question. They give you a specific focus, so specifically focus on that. So for example, a low-level example would be if the question was compare how the jobs are presented. Source A is about a girl on a farm, source B is about a girl in an office. Technically, that is a comparison, yes, but it's not really focused on the question, it's not focused on jobs, and it hasn't given us any inferences. It hasn't said what it could suggest. So what we always want to do is always want to link back to the focus of the question and explain what the comparison shows. So again, if it is all about jobs, I must use the word jobs because that is the focus of the question. So a high-level example would be, source A shows the job as exhausting and isolating. So you can see I've actually explained what it is, whereas source B presents it as sociable and easy. This highlights the emotional contrast between the two experiences. And then you can go on to say what each one suggests. So then it's very clear I am focusing on jobs because that is the focus of the questions. And then I've compared it as well. You can see that in my original one, I said source A is about a girl on a farm, source B is about a girl in an office. There's no comparison. I've got my comparison word, which is whereas, and I've actually explained what the focus is, which is about jobs. Now, question 3, rolling on to question 3. This is the language question. Now, language question, this is the exact same question as language paper 1, question 2, but it's just worth more marks. This is 12 marks rather than 8 marks. So we just got to do a bit more for this. So it'll be, how does the writer use language to describe the T-Rex, the job, her emotions, whatever it is? The time is 12 to 15 minutes on this. And the top skills to use is I want you to use imagery. Imagery is a really easy one. This is more so techniques. I want you to look at what image is it creating? Is there any sensory descriptions of what you're seeing or what kind of image is it painting in your mind? Metaphors and similes. Remember, a metaphor is saying something is something else, whereas a simile is saying something is like something else. So metaphor we're saying it actually is, simile is like it's like. And then emotive language. Especially in paper 2, this is of course non-fiction. So non-fiction means it's real life. So they'll be using a lot of emotive language. They'll be trying to persuade you about something, trying to inform you about something. So look at what kind of language is used. So let's have a little look at what not to do and what to do for this question. So the main mistake is spotting techniques without analysis or just quoting. Technique spotting is the number one thing that students do when analysing. They'll be like, okay, I know I need to analyse language in this, so let me just pull out a language technique and then do nothing with it. So please, let's not do that, okay? So the low-level example would be, there is a metaphor and a simile. Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. And doesn't tell me anything. That is technique spotting. Also, a little top tip on that. You don't want to pull out a technique if you actually don't know the effect of it. So it's really important to know effects of techniques. So for example, on language paper 2, if we go on the language technique sheet, then we'll be able to actually see the effects of each technique. So we can see here, alliteration, the effect of the technique, an example of how to use it. And then you just want to be thinking about, okay, how am I using these techniques? So let's say, for example, we go into language paper 2, because that is what we're doing. And let's go on to the language technique sheet. So what we want to do is we want to pre-learn the effects of different language techniques. So then going in, we can literally just use that effect and then we just link it to whatever we're talking about. So say, for example, we know alliteration. We know the effect of alliteration is to draw attention to certain phrases or sentences. It makes more emphasis on it. So then whatever I'm talking about, say I'm analysing anything in language, then I just know, okay, if I pick out alliteration, I'd say the alliteration draws emphasis on, and then pick out something from the extract, which illustrates da-da-da-da-da. So you just want to make sure you know the effect of the technique, and then you can just put it in and then link it to whatever you're talking about. Super easy. And so what we want to do is we want to zoom in on connotations and explain what the technique reveals and why the writer uses it. So we want to talk about the effects of technique. So for example, the metaphor, a prison of glass and steel, suggests the modern office is dehumanizing. So you can see there, I've said what the metaphor does. It's saying it is something. So it suggests the modern office is dehumanizing. Because remember, if you're comparing something with a metaphor, saying it is something else, think about, okay, if they are saying it's a prison, what is a prison? A prison is dehumanizing. Okay, so they're saying that their work is dehumanizing. Prison implies entrapment, reinforcing the writer's view that work is a place that mirrors enslavement and is restricting. So you can see there, I've got my technique, I've talked about the effect, so I've said like what the effect is, that it's dehumanizing, then I've explained it, then I've said, okay, this is what it shows, I've kind of zoomed in and said what it shows about the place of work, what it's implying. Yes, a prison of glass and steel doesn't say that modern work is enslavement, but think about what is a prison like and how can I link that to what I'm talking about. You don't want to go to prison. It's not a pleasant place. You're entrapped. There's no daylight. So now just think about all of those things associated with the prison. And then I'm just going to link that in my analysis to the focus of the question, which is about jobs. Lovely. And then question 4 is comparing of viewpoints. Now, I'd probably say this question is done the worst out of all questions on both language papers. So it's important that we get this one because so many people lose marks on it. So this is compare how writers convey their different perspectives and attitudes. Now, everybody gets thrown by this wording. Everybody is like, attitudes and perspectives? What does that mean? It just means their opinion. Are they for something? Are they against something? That is simply what it means. That's all we're seeing. If I was going to tell you my opinion on something, and say, for example, like, I think AI is going to ruin humanity and it's going to take over, what's my attitude and perspective on AI? It's pretty pessimistic. It's pretty negative. Probably not very favorable of it. I probably won't use it. So just think about what are they for or against, very simply. So time to spend on this is about 18 to 20 minutes. And the top skills to use is we want to look at, and this is for techniques as well, we want to look at imageries and metaphors. We can talk about language and structure techniques for this question, by the way. It's not just a language, not just a structure, it's language and structure. We can look at emotive language versus factual tones. So we can actually look at tone. Because this is non-fiction, we can actually assess what kind of tone they have. Do they have a factual tone? Are they kind of presenting it as more of a factual argument? Are they more emotive? Are they more thinking about the emotions to sway the reader? So thinking about how anybody presents an argument, if, for example, you were arguing with your brother or sister, are they a screamer where they're like, you did this, how did you do that? Or they're like, when you did this, and I noted this down, at 10:59 yesterday, you left your plate in the sink, mum blamed me for it. Think about what kind of tone they take. And that kind of conveys the argument they're trying to make or the kind of person they are as well. And then zoom in on structures. So shift in focus from wide to detailed. So we can use language techniques, we can use structure techniques, and we can also talk about tone. There are 3 different categories of technique that you can comment on for this comparison. Okay, let's dive into it. So the main mistake is naming techniques without comparing their effects. So this is quite similar to what a lot of students do for question 3, but we want to be comparing their effects. Not just talking about the effects, what I showed you, like alliteration and the effect of that, but comparing the effects and how that shows the writer's viewpoint. So for example, a low-level example would say, writer A uses emotive language, whereas writer B uses facts. We don't really get an actual explanation. We get a difference. Obviously, it's a comparison of the different things that they use. We don't really get an explanation of the effects and how they're different. So what we're going to do is directly compare how each writer uses methods to reflect their viewpoint. So if, for example, they are using emotive language, how does that reflect their viewpoint? Just like the example I gave you about arguing with a sibling, if they have using loads of emotive language, how does that show their viewpoint? If they're, really crying about it and they're using they're saying like, this really hurt me, perhaps that leaving your dish in the sink was a personal attack on them. It shows that you don't care. You can kind of see, what does that show about their viewpoint? So just how their methods, what does it show us about the bigger picture? So a high-level example would be writer A uses emotive language like shameful neglect to create moral outrage, illustrating how this deeply and personally affects them. So we can see there emotive language, but what does it do? It creates moral outrage. So I'm talking about the effect, and then I've kind of explained what it does to them. Then I said, however, writer B uses statistics to appear more calm and authoritative, indicating how they approach it more objectively and logically. So again, I've said about statistics and what it does, what the effect of it does, and then I've explained it. And then that way I'm comparing the effects, because I'm kind of talking about emotive language versus facts, and I'm comparing how the writers have done it and what that kind of shows about them and their opinions. And then question 5 is transactional writing. So this is like letter, speech, article, or essay in which you argue for or against a statement. So you'll be given a statement about a topic and you have to argue for or against it. The time to spend on this is between 40 to 45 minutes. And top skills to use is you want to use rhetorical questions to show you are questioning something. Please don't overly use them, because I see it happen a lot with students. They'll use rhetorical questions every 2 minutes. Try limit yourself to maximum 2, I'd say, for rhetorical questions. Rule of 3 and repetition. So think about repeating 3 words or phrases to iterate your point. So for example, if you're talking about AI, you could say harmful, controlling, authoritative, and they could be your rule of 3, and you kind of introducing a point. It's like a really punchy way to emphasize certain ideas. And then direct address. Really powerful if you are writing, a letter, an article, or a speech, when you're directly addressing someone. You might say like, we're doing this, it's your responsibility. It makes it more persuasive, because that's the whole point of transactional or persuasive writing, is you want to persuade. So think about if, again, you are, let's take the example of a sibling again. I've got loads of sibling examples today. Say your brother or sister, you're trying to persuade them to go walk the dog because you don't want to do it. You CBA, you don't want to walk the dog, you're watching a series or something, you don't want to do it. You wouldn't be like, just walk the dog. If you were clever, you'd be like, that would really help me. You would be really helping the dog, and it would really benefit you because you can go and get your steps in. Like, you give loads of different reasons why they should go walk the dog. And if you're being clever about it, you'd make it seem pleasant to them and you directly address them. So that is the kind of thing of when we're being persuasive. Think about in real life, if you're going to try to persuade someone of something, you wouldn't just give them one reason. You wouldn't just try one way. If one way wasn't working, you'd probably go to another way. So think about it like that. And then in terms of mistakes, main mistake is forgetting the audience or going off topic. So kind of forgetting who you're addressing and not really answering the focus of the question. So for example, low-level example would be, phones are good, uniform is annoying. This doesn't really tell me what they're focusing on. Like, just reading that, I don't know what even the focus of the statement is, and that should be really clear by reading an argument. And I don't know who they're addressing. It should be clear. If I don't read anything to do with the question, I should know what argument you're for or against. I should know if you are for or against as well. Don't be balanced. Give me your for or against. And then I should also know who you're addressing without reading the question. So if you read back your response and you can't tell either of those two things, make sure you go back and put in some things being specifically focused back to the statement and also addressing the audience. So then a top tip is to match your tone and content to the audience and keep each paragraph focused on one key point. So what I mean by that is we want to keep the tone, so is it formal or informal, and the content, the way we're actually talking about things, exactly the same to our audience. For example, mobile phones, when used responsibly, support learning by offering quick access to research and promoting independent thinking, vital in today's under-resourced classrooms. So you can see there, it's very clear I'm focusing on the statement about mobile phones. I've expanded upon my point. It's very clear I've got a focus of a statement. Now, if I was going to go and take it further and be really clear on my audience, what I would make sure I do is reference things that would be interest of the person I'm talking to. If I'm talking to teenagers, I'm probably going to talk about social media or homework or school or parents or, like going out at the weekends. Like, I would talk about things that would interest them. If I'm referencing parents, I might reference kids, school system, the economy, politics. I could mention all of those different things. So think about the way that you're talking, think about the tone you use, how formal or informal it is, but also the kind of things you're mentioning as examples. Would that relate to your audience? If you were writing this for your grandma versus your friend, what the different examples would you give? Because I bet you any money your grandma, unless she's advanced with technology, she might well be, isn't going to be really up to date on TikTok trends. But if you're talking to students, then they absolutely would. So you've got to adapt it. And that is a full breakdown, guys. I hope this helps you before your exams. If you did like this, give it a thumbs up, do subscribe, and send it to any of your friends.